59 years ago, Kenneth Charles Mantin was born here in Halifax. He attended St. Thomas Aquinas Elementary Junior High before entering St. Pat's High School, where he developed a reputation as an outstanding, clean-cut, all-Canadian boy. His appearance, his friends delighted in describing, came because young Kenny had the cleanest hair in town. At 5'0", it seems his mother used to lean Ken over the sink daily and scrub his head, much to the delight of his buddies who invariably cheered her on. If they were typical of their time, they probably washed their hair about once a month. We who know Ken Mantin, or Pudgy, as I found out he was then called, I love that, realize that there's a tenacity beneath the quiet veneer which has helped him over many years accomplish many tasks. He certainly got some of this from his mom. Once when Pudgy got laid out in a high school hockey game, Steve Carew remembers sitting in his St. Mary's High School cheering section and joining in on the little ditty which ends up, "Dig a hole and bury him," only to find his singing brought up short because Mrs. Mantin was pummeling him with an umbrella. Last year, as St. Pat's invited commencement speaker, Ken Mantin recalled the very positive influence of teachers like Chris Grant, Jack Lynch, Bill McKay, Burns Adams, and George Haley. He also had the distinct pleasure of awarding the Burke's Medal to Sean Brunt, student elected as having worked hardest towards improving student life at the school. The special pleasure came because Mantin could look back fondly at having been president of both his class and the student government, and he could also savor the warmth he'd felt when he'd received that same Burke's Medal exactly 40 years ago. His early service obviously continued since he received a gold pin for his leadership in student athletic activities while studying at St. Mary's University. He must already have been seen as a mature, sober young man in the community, because at the same time he was elected Secretary-Treasurer of the Halifax Minor Hockey Association, a great compliment to someone of 17 years of age. From the time he was 11, Pudgy played at every level of minor hockey, from Pee Wee to junior. He also played at the high school, university, and senior levels. Joe McSweeney recalls that he was an outstanding high school player. He's up here, of course, as a builder, but like so many of our builders over the years, he did have his moments in the sun as a participant. When he played for the Laurie Smith coached St. Pat's team, he and his line mates, Bernie Levy, Jimmy O'Regan, led the high school team to an undefeated season. People forget that Pudgy Mantin was 9th in the league in scoring, once netting 4 goals against St. Mary's High School in the 1954 playoffs. Taking an undefeated record into a game with a vocational school the following year, Mantin took the face-off at center ice, deked one man, let a shot fly, and scored an unassisted goal in 13 seconds. But always being a team man, there's little question but what Mantin probably looks back at his 2 goals in the final game against Truro as his favorite playing memory. They helped St. Pat's take the Headmasters A championship. But since we've never fussed over anyone on this stage without giving the skeletons a bit of a rattle, if only to see these heroes as human like the rest of us, I went digging into the memories of some of his closest friends to learn that this pious, awe-inspiring, well-respected man, whom most of us have always called Mr. Mantin, sir, has many friends who delight in describing some of the incidents in which Pudgy and his gang came head-to-head with one authority or another. In one instance, Dacey's mother was understandably upset when her son came home with a painted face. Face was semi-permanently bright green because Mantin, Dave Dunlap, and the boys used the leftover green enamel from Tommy McQuarrie's garage. It appears there's a side to St. Kenny, which many younger people with whom he's worked over the years would love to have known. Granville Kelly recalls their St. Pat's team losing 5-2 in the provincial final at Sydney Academy. 4 of the players found a bootlegger, I'm told Pat Conley knows his name, who was willing to sell them a flask of rum. Well, all would have gone unnoticed, as so many such incidents do, had they not found a discarded crate of oranges on their way back to the Isle Royal. One thing led to another, after which the 4 boys found themselves in the back of a Sydney paddy wagon. Pudgy noticed that the one cop's badge said William McIntyre. On a hunch, perhaps the luckiest he ever had, he told the policeman how they were only out drowning their sorrows because their team had been outcoached by the Sydney Academy mentor, an ex-Sydney Millionaire star named Dumph McIntyre. After the officer, one day to be captain of the Sydney police force, spent 10 minutes bragging that the coach in question was his brother, the 4 kids were driven to within a block of the hotel entrance and released. The boys decided right there that Ken Mantin was one day going to be a great leader. As it turned out, his leadership in sport has stretched 50 years. From 1958 to 65, Ken Mantin was clerk of works, City of Halifax. From 65 to 67, secretary manager of the Colchester Legion Truro Stadium Recreation Commission. He commenced that job before they even finished building the stadium. In 67, Ken Mantin was the one chosen over 300 others to be the first development coordinator of the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association, working in both Winnipeg and Ottawa. How was it that he was chosen over so many? It seems that this Blue Noser had worked pretty hard for hockey since he'd accepted that position as a teenager, secretary-treasurer of the Halifax Minor Hockey Association so many years previously. He got his feet wet fast. After 4 years as secretary-treasurer, he took over as president. He kept that position for several years, 8 in fact. His responsibility on one occasion being to suspend Googie Fitzgerald after he got into an altercation with the game referee, Hal Lewis. We'll never know whether Mantin would have suspended him if he could have predicted that what an important man the Honorable Walter Fitzgerald was going to become, but most would bet that the decision would still be the same. Mantin helped form House League hockey, so all who wished could have a chance to play. The 12 teams, when he started, turned into 80. Later, as president of the Minor Hockey Association, a post he held for a decade, his leadership saw NSHA registrations grow to 14,000 by 1994. He saw female hockey grow from 27 registrations to 250. He set up the first ever conference on violence in hockey. Under his leadership, a plan of action to lead hockey into the 90s was established, as was a code of discipline. He formed Minor Hockey Night, which the CAHA now uses in developing its coast-to-coast Minor Hockey Week in Canada. During his 4 years with the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association, he oversaw their 500,000 players on 25,000 registered teams. He oversaw 11 branch members, plus Armed Force Hockey, plus CIAU Hockey. He was responsible for hockey in the Canada Games and in the first Arctic Games in 1972. He organized the Yukon Northwest Territories Amateur Hockey Association. He made films and film strips aimed at familiarizing inexperienced coaches and referees with their new undertakings. During his CAHA tenure, he was responsible for the distribution of more than $1 million a year. For these and many other reasons, Ken Mantin is known across Canada for what he contributed to hockey, but he's anything but a one-sport man. During his career, he's involved in organizing intermediate and senior softball, police boys club sports, including boxing and wrestling, Rotary Club handicap sports, football programs, minor baseball, Halifax Community Athletic Council. He assisted in forming the Truro Amateur Sport Commission. Much of his volunteer work took him further afield in sport. Over the many years, he's been on the executive, the Atlantic Arena Managers Association, the Immaculate Conception Parish Council, the Assiniboia Christian Center, St. Teresa's Parish Council, Truro, Ottawa, and Winnipeg Rotary Clubs, Truro Board of Trade, Kirkfield Community Council, Ottawa South Community Association, and of course the list goes on and on. He's been part of the Canadian Coaches Association, Canadian Olympic Committee, and the CAHL-NHL Joint Negotiating Committee. In 1971, he came back home as the first Chief Executive Officer for Sport Nova Scotia. During the 9 years he spent with them, he helped build more than 50 amateur sport governing bodies into strong, viable organizations. It was Ken Mantin who called Tommy Sweet and asked if he would be willing to inventory the Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame stuff collected in the old industrial building. At the time, there was no Board of Governors, there was no selection committee. He set up the structure which got this all started. Ken Mantin has been honored many times. He's the only life member of the Halifax Minor Hockey Association. In 1988, he was given the CAHA Award of Merit. His name is on the honor roll of Canadian Hockey Hall of Fame, an award presented to only 4 other Nova Scotians in the Hall's 32-year history. It is now our pleasure to join with Betty, his wife of 36 years, his 3 kids, and his 5 grandchildren, in honoring him where it all started. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our latest inductee to the Nova Scotia Sport Heritage Centre Hall of Fame, one of the first architects of the very organization which tonight honors him, the youngest ever officer in the Halifax Minor Hockey Association, the first ever executive director of Sport Nova Scotia, the first ever CEO of the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association, the father of Minor Hockey Week in Canada, a Nova Scotian, to whom we all owe a great, great, great debt of gratitude, Mr. Kenneth Charles Matin.
At this time, I would ask Dr. Carl Bucky Buchanan, representing our Board of Directors, to join us for the presentation. Kenny, I have a sheaf of congratulatory messages. We'd be here till midnight if I started to read them all, but I think you should hear some of them at least. Best wishes from Bernard McGuinness, past president of the Halifax Minor Hockey Association, Canadian Hockey Association, Frank Lento, chairman, Murray Costello, president, Hockey Manitoba, Sheldon Lanchbury, president, New Brunswick Amateur Hockey Association, Doug Steeves, president, Francis Wiseman, former chairperson of the Newfoundland Minor Hockey Council, and Don Brown, president of the Ottawa District Hockey Association. It goes on and on and on, tributes to you from across the country, which is a striking tribute to the work that you have done for the game over many, many years.
Thank you, Pat. It's really overwhelming and quite rewarding tonight.
You know, you have to take a particular and personal satisfaction in what we are about to see tomorrow, and that is the end product of an idea that was yours in the beginning, in collaboration and conjunction with some other people and some help from higher sources. But it was your idea. I remember back in the 1970s that the Nova Scotia Hall of Fame should be revived, Sports Hall of Fame, bigger and better, and see what's happened.
Well, I think that's fair to say, Pat, but I think in fairness it was a dream of many people. Perhaps that I was in the right place at the right time, perhaps to take it over from the old form and maybe get it started up again. But since then, it's been the contribution of so many people, and I think you know, it's a credit to all the volunteers over the past 17 years that have made it what it is today. So maybe in some small way I did have a part, but I think that part was only a minor one.
Well, Frank Nix made a point yesterday, and he said, while we were going through the new hall, and he said, wouldn't Guy be happy about that? Of course, referring to Guy Ahern, who had the original idea.
Well, as I say, I can remember going up as a youngster to watch the hockey games, and you'd go in and you'd see a half a dozen buckets, you know, keeping the rain out, and Guy and a few others manning it, and Harry Butler and them, and you know, without them, it's fine to say without us and others who have followed them, but really without them it wouldn't have even started. So I guess one has to look back at their foresight, and hopefully, as I say, that others involved will certainly get recognition too, because everybody has played a part in that, Pat.
In hockey, you've watched many, many changes. The evolution of the game, really, over the years that you have been in it as a player and later as an executive, many changes. Are they all for the better?
Well, I think everybody knows my position as far as the way the game is played. I'm not so certain I concur that it's better the way it's played. I'm talking about the violent side of it, although I must say I think that's changing somewhat. As far as the level of caliber, there's no question that, as Ralph Simmons said earlier, when you look at sport 20 or 30 years ago versus today, one just has to look at the equipment, the coaching, the size of the athletes, and the facilities, and there's no comparison. But I think the game of hockey still has somewhere to go to get it back to where it should be, and that is to let the skillful hockey players play the game the way it should be played. And I'm glad to see, hopefully, that the professional ranks are starting to look at it and try to open up the game so that the people can enjoy the talents of so many players, and we'd get rid of the players who have to resort sort of to the offending acts in order to survive, at that level. So I think hockey is coming. It's like everything else, the caliber is, there's no question, it's so much superior at the size of the kids. One just has to look at Bantam players and look at me, and I played hockey, and I would never survive today with size alone. So it's a different game altogether.
Professionally, with the tremendous development of the game south of us, is Canada in danger of losing its hockey identity?
Well, I felt it had been in danger for the last 10 years. First of all, the moment you had an American president, I think that in itself, or commissioner, started to change some things. Now we see Winnipeg and Edmonton in difficulty. I fear very, very much for the game of hockey being lost to Canada. I guess one could say, though, we don't own the game, so I suppose, as like everything else, things have changed. But I wish we had some stronger franchises in Canada so that we wouldn't lose the identity that we seem to be losing, Pat.
Is there anything Canadians can do to head it off?
Well, as I say, it's all business, and the market, you need a certain, population in order to sustain the salaries and the cost to run a franchise. And unfortunately, places like Winnipeg and, as I say, Edmonton looks to be on the brink, and Quebec, as you know, they've moved out, and I suspect it won't be long before Ottawa may be in difficulty, and we may just find Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, where you're talking 2 or 3 million people able to sustain a hockey club. And that's sad. I don't know what the answer is to keep it here, Pat. What I can see, though, is a sort of a rebirth of hockey below the NHL level, where we may have, the International Hockey League and leagues like that, coming up where NHL franchises were. But it's a sad day when the game of hockey really is being dominated south of the border.
From an amateur perspective, the biggest single complaint from parents with 1 or more children who they want to become involved with the game is the cost today. Is that valid?
Well, I think it's valid to a point, but there's certainly ways that they can participate without getting into that cost. I think we're into an era where everybody has to have the best. I'm not so sure that's required. There are arrangements whereby people who don't have equipment can get equipment through exchanges, and I've never seen, Pat, really, and I must admire the minor hockey associations in our province, I've never seen a youngster who really wanted to play that minor hockey association didn't provide an opportunity, whether they were missing the registration fee or the equipment. I have not seen that.
We could go on for a long time. Time does not permit it. Kenny, thank you for your contributions, tremendous contributions, both to hockey and to the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame. Kenny Matin, ladies and gentlemen.